So as we look at the example of Barnabas and Saul in this apprenticing process, what we can see is a really good example of how someone goes from being, frankly, quite an unlikely candidate to being probably the most significant Christian in the early church. So what we see first of all is that Barnabas, first of all, recognizes the potential in Saul. He went looking for Saul because he recognized that he had potential as a leader. Yes, it was misdirected. Yes, it was at this point to the detriment, or had been up to this point, to the detriment of the church. But Barnabas sensed something in Saul and he took a risk. You can see in Acts 11, verses 25 to 26, that Barnabas went out of his way to take that risk. Then you can see that Barnabas brings Saul back to Antioch, but he establishes Saul's credibility by taking Saul under his wing, by taking the lead role, and by allowing Saul to begin to grow in experience, to grow in credibility. He gave him those opportunities. He took the lead, but he used his influence to introduce Saul. The establishing of the credibility of a potential new leader, an apprentice leader, is a crucial thing that an established leader can do. But beyond that, he was prepared to share his ministry with Saul, seeing this as from the Lord rather than as a threat to his status. So you can see in Acts 12, 25 to 13, verse 3. And then you can see that he allowed Saul, or Paul as he became known, he allowed him to increase through gradually himself decreasing. He had the maturity to take a step back and then to take another step back. You can see that in Acts 13, verse 6 onwards. And so from Acts 13, verse 42, the two of them are referred to as Paul and Barnabas, rather than their previous assignation, Barnabas and Saul. And you can see what Barnabas has done there. He's brought Saul in, he's given him the credibility, he's allowed Saul to grow, he's allowed him to take the steps forward, he's gradually stepped back to allow Paul to become the person that God's called him to be. Now, he managed to do this, Barnabas, by being confident of the way that God had gifted him. This was not a threat to him. Paul rising up was not a threat to Barnabas. It was a joy for him to see. And that just shows that Barnabas truly was a servant of the Lord. He recognized Paul's teaching gift and his speaking gift. He was content to let that flourish. Now, he was there to offer advice and guidance, and yet he recognized that Paul must increasingly make his own way in life. So even when Barnabas and Paul have a major falling out, a major disagreement over the inclusion or otherwise of John Mark in a mission team, and they couldn't agree on this, Barnabas never pulls rank and says to him, hey, I'm the leader here, you're the apprentice, and so what I say goes. He'd never dream of pulling rank in that way. Now, even though Barnabas was later proved to be right about John Mark, and John Mark became one of Paul's most trusted friends, as you can see in 2 Timothy 4, verse 11, yet he still honoured this process of having allowed Paul to grow in his leadership ministry, in his teaching and preaching ministry. He wasn't going to pull the rug out from under his feet when things didn't go the way he wanted them to.